you will always be like a foreigner if you're in Taiwan because of this, you know. Everywhere I walked, as soon as I just said like ni hao, people be like, wow, oh my god, your Chinese is amazing.
What is in Taiwan that you can't get in another place?
What is in another place that I cannot get in Taiwan? That's the question. So that has always been like the biggest, like, wow, I cannot believe that this isn't a thing in some countries.
Appreciate you doing this, man. Thank you.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty much in the same situation as you, so I know how sometimes it could be very difficult to get people like interested and having the time. So as soon as I saw your text, I was like, yeah, I need to do this. I know the struggles he's going through. Yeah.
You understand me. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And I mean, I'm also not just trying to fill a booking. You know, when I found you, I thought, wow, this is really cool. Sweden, Taiwan, what an unusual combination. And so
it is. Yeah.
I really want to get into that. I want to hear about how you got to Taiwan and the things that you're doing there, but I also want to hear about the backstory on how you ended up where you are. So can you run me through that? Where are you from originally?
Of course, yes. I'm from Sweden. Originally from like the tiniest of forests, basically. Like everyone always asks me like, which city? But we have like, 1 hour drive to the nearest city. So I always say like, I'm from the forest close to the Norwegian border. That's like the most accurate. So actually closer to Oslo in Norway than Stockholm in Sweden. So one of those forest boys. And then I moved away from my parents, which sounds very like dramatic, but I went to like a boarding school for high school. And then in that city south of Sweden, they had a university who then had exchange to Taiwan. So I was like growing up in the middle of nowhere in Sweden, accidentally ended up at this university for reasons we may or may not go into here. It depends on how long you want this video to be. But at this university, they had exchange programs. And the reality is that I just applied for an exchange program to leave Sweden or leave my university. And then my university just picked, I think they went by grades or something. I don't remember. But they just told me like, hey, if you want to be a part of this program and study abroad, you go to Taiwan. And I'm like, what? Like I had no idea. So I never chose Taiwan. Like I just chose to leave Sweden and then Taiwan chose me.
And so was that the first time that you left Sweden?
Well, I've been like traveling like a bit before, like both on my own, but also like with my parents and stuff. But it was my first time in Asia. And through this program as well, like the first, it was 1 year abroad in this school. So my first semester was actually in the US, in Fairbanks, Alaska. Of all places.
Alaska.
Yeah. So I literally went like as far as I can, like west, and then second semester, like literally as far as I could east. So it was, it was a great experience.
So you went from like not only a small town, but also a small country. I mean, Sweden is not very big. All the way to like the far reaches of the planet.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, compared to Taiwan, like mass size, it's like enormous compared to Taiwan actually, but in terms of like population and crowdness, it's like nothing. But yeah, so that's something that I've been struggling about as well, because like I make my YouTube videos like supposed to be the difference between like Sweden and Taiwan, but a lot of differences I've discovered afterwards is just like countryside versus city, so it's very hard for me to know like what is actually the cultural differences and what is actually the difference between growing up in a forest and growing up like in an actual apartment. It's very interesting, and it feels like I have two completely different lives when I'm in Sweden and here in Taiwan.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I've kind of thought about that myself. I'm also from a really small town in Canada, like 5,000 people, so really, really small. And I think that I also have the tendency to associate that with what Canada is. So when I say, oh, I don't like this about living in Canada, I don't like how you always have to have a car to get everywhere. And then I go, well, I mean, that is a common thing in Canada, but if you live in a town that's bigger than 5,000 people, there might be public transit options that would solve that problem, right? And so that could be a small town problem and not necessarily a universal Canada problem. And so I can relate to that. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Where are you from in Canada? Like Ontario or Vancouver? Which is like pretty much
well, I live in Vancouver now, which is in British Columbia, but I'm from Alberta. So that's the next province over, just one province over to the east. It's in like Western Canada. The major city is Calgary. I don't know if you know that or not.
The Canucks.
The Canucks are from Vancouver. The Vancouver Canucks. We have the Calgary Flames in Alberta.
Oh, the Flames. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I should know this. I'm from Sweden, but yeah. I guess you don't have that many Swedish players, so it's not covered in the news.
Right. Yeah. The Canucks were famous a few years ago for having the Sundin twins from Sweden. Right. They were the big deal. The 1-2 combination. That was crazy to have two identical twins, both playing in the NHL, both playing on the same team. That was insane.
Yeah. We also had like the Lundqvist, Henrik Lundqvist, the goalkeeper. He also has a brother. So they played together in Sweden, which was also like confusing. They're not twins, but they like look very similar as well. So once you had like the four of them, you're like, wow, what is going on?
Yeah, the Swedes are really, really good at hockey. You guys are like top tier for sure. We're always playing each other in the Olympics and the juniors, I feel like.
Yeah. It's quite good though. Like I feel like we're drifting off topic here now, but like there are a lot of Canadians in Taiwan as well, actually. So
really?
I feel like in terms of like the nationality that I can most relate to here in Taiwan are the Canadians, because I feel like we're very similar, like both Canada and Sweden. So I hang out a lot with Canadians here. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we probably have similar climates, right? Kind of the same distance from the equator.
Yeah.
Cold winters, hockey fans. Yeah, I don't know. Probably a lot of similarities.
Yeah, we all love maple syrup. That's good.
Yeah, sure. So you did an exchange through your university. That's how you first ended up in Taiwan. And so what age were you at that point then?
What age? 21 maybe? Like
okay.
Fresh out of like university. So 21. And then it was the first time was only one exchange semester. So I already knew like I'm gonna go back home again to like finish off my studies. But just like the first time when I got like the email from my mentor saying like you're going to go to Taiwan, the thing was like they actually listed in the list as like Republic of China, like ROC, which is like the official name of Taiwan, at least back then in the Swedish records. So it never said like Taiwan. So I didn't even know until like I had to like book the plane ticket to see like which city am I going to, that I realized it was in Taiwan. So 3 days before I flew over, that's when I realized that Taiwan was an island. And okay. I was literally like packing my bags, and I was like, do I need to bring like long pants, or like it's Asia, so it should be like shorts for like 6 months. And then I was just like Googling, and I was like, it's an island. It's like, it's not even like part of China. Like what is this? So that's how much I knew about Taiwan beforehand.
So is it fair to say that the exchange program didn't necessarily prepare you for what you were getting into? I mean, for one thing, you didn't choose it.
Nothing.
Another thing, they didn't even tell you where it was.
Nothing. Literally the only information I got when I was already in Sweden, they said like, you know, this is the school. I got like all the information and like address and stuff. And then they said like, they're going to be two buddies. They're going to pick you up at the airport and like welcoming you and take care of you in Taiwan. So I had like that kind of like safety net. But my Swedish school, like, could not care less. They just want to get me out of there, you know.
And did you go alone, or did you go with other Swedish students?
So I ended up actually going with 2 other Swedish students, but I didn't know that at the time. I knew that when I was in Taiwan, and I was like, "Oh, hey, you're actually." One of them was even from my school, but I didn't know until I like was in Taiwan already. So that's the level of information I got, you know.
Not the most organized program in the world, let's say.
No.
Mm-hmm. And so, how long have you been in Taiwan now?
And now it's been 14 years.
14 years. Wow.
Yeah. So the first time I was just an exchange student for like 1 semester. I met a girl here, like my ex-girlfriend. And here, I mean, I'm in Taiwan right now. So I met her here in Taiwan. and then she was going to study in Sweden. So we hit it off like right away because we were like the school put us together in this like buddy system. And then because she was going to go back to Sweden, we planned, okay, I will take care of you. We ended up being together. And then when she then finished her 1 year in Sweden to go back, then she convinced me to come back to Taiwan. Because I thought I was done with Taiwan after my exchange semester. I was like, I've already seen everything there is to see. But because of her, then she brought me back again a second time. And that was like 2012, 2010, something around that time. And then I've been here ever since. I've gone back like quite a few times, of course, but I've lived here ever since. Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty big change, though, to say, okay, I've been here for 6 months. I'm happy with that. That's good enough. To then turning around, coming back to Taiwan, and then spending the next 14 years there.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, for me, I always took it like 1 year at a time. So it has like its pros and cons as well. But when I came back here, like the second time, I just applied for like 1 year language classes here in Taiwan for like just 1 year. And then I ended up like, okay, just one more year. Okay, just one more year. So I was like, and then it continued basically until like 6 years ago. So 6 years ago was the first time that's when I started my YouTube channel and making YouTube videos. That was the first time I actually had like a Taiwan plan that was longer than like 1 year. So it was very hard in the beginning to really like feel like home here because it wasn't my home. It was just like a temporarily 1 year place to live for like 8 years in a row. And that also means like it's very hard to get into like the Taiwanese systems. Like as a student, you're not allowed to have a credit card. Everything was cash for like 8 years. Like even my rent, like meeting the landlord once a month to pay rent. And stuff like this, and it was at least very, very difficult because there was also not that many foreigners here in Taiwan at the time, so nothing was like available or made for you being a foreigner without being like in the Taiwanese system, and still to this date, it's like there's so many things that are just not made for foreigners, and it's very low priority to fix that actually.
And what was the significance of the year? Was that like the visa you had to renew on a yearly basis, or?
So actually, no. The school semester is 3 months at a time, and the school visa is like 3 months at a time. It was just like my mental plan, Like I signed up for like 3 months classes here in Taiwan, but I thought like if I should go back to Sweden for whatever reason, I should go back like during the summer because that will be easier to get like a job in Sweden, and then like actually get my career started. So I planned everything in like 1 year contracts, and also like I think my apartments was always like minimum 1 year as well. So there was like, because of that, I did it like 1 year at a time, but my school was only 3 months at a time. So I did it like 25 semesters in a row or something like that.
So it was kind of, the year was a little bit arbitrary. It was like something that you had in your own mind about like, okay, we'll see what this looks like in 12 months kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. Like we always say, like the Taiwanese time zone is completely different. Like it's like Peter Pan and Neverland here, Like you never grow up, and it's like time is not a thing as a foreigner in Taiwan.
Yeah, it slips through your fingers. So then you went there the first time, you went back to Sweden, and then your ex-girlfriend said, hey, let's go back to Taiwan again. You said, okay, let's do it. And then what kept you there, let's say, for the first year?
So for the first year, I already paid my tuition for my language school. So like we broke up like within months after me coming back again, because she was like a local in Taiwan, and I always wanted to explore everything. So it was a very, very big like mismatch where I felt like in order for me to get like the freedom of exploring Taiwan, I couldn't really be with her anymore. So, but the first year I already paid like 1 year tuition. I had a 1 year contract. So I just learned Chinese, Mandarin. And the only reason for that, like I hate languages, like even learning like Swedish in school back home in Sweden, or English, was like terrible. And I also studied like Spanish because you have to, And then now I was like paying money to learn a fourth language. And I was like, no, this doesn't make any sense. But the reason for that is because the Swedish government actually pays for your studies, and they pay for your studies even if you study in Sweden or if you would happen to study in Taiwan. And you also get paid. So almost like, I think it's like 800 USD per month as a student just to study. So they paid for my studies here. And that was like a way for me to just like, okay, I have 2 hours of language class every day. And then the rest is just like chilling, living like my best life.
I mean, it's hard to say no to that, honestly.
Exactly, yeah. So like all my other friends, they would stay in Sweden, and then they would have like maybe like a more in-depth, like a doctorate or like a PhD or something. And I was just like, I'm so tired of studying, but I'm going to put that money into like my Chinese, because I studied business back home in Sweden, and everyone said like, you know, if you study business, like international business, you should learn Chinese, because that is where all the money is going to be like 10 years from now. So I just did that because that's what people told me to do. And it was also a way for me to not having to worry about my life for the next couple of years.
And like, if you have a partner from another country, it makes it a lot easier, because like, I mean, they're going to show you the local experience, right? You can hang out with their friends, maybe with their family. They're going to show you where to eat. They're going to show you how to take the bus and the train and everything. So when you guys broke up, like, did it feel like you were kind of on your own in a new country? Like, how was that?
No, so for me, it was actually the opposite, because she, at that time, she was so busy with her like thesis and her studies. So she didn't really have any time anyway. But it was my international classmates who were exactly like what we're describing now, like someone to explore with, and then someone was like more advanced in Chinese at the time, so they would be like the tour guides when we go out, you know. So it was a little bit like, although there's no like actual classes, like you have a language class with like 8 people in the school, and so there's no like rank like 1, 2, 3-year students or anything like that. But it kind of ended up being that anyway, because you're like, oh, you know, like this guy, he's been here for like 2 years. He knows the best restaurant in that city. Let's be friends with him, so then we can explore that city, you know. So we took advantage of the people who had been here for like a longer time, which is like 1 year plus in like 400 years in Taiwan. So we had our own little system among the foreigners, and even get like an apartment back then, because even to this day, it's very hard for international students, because we don't have like the proper paperwork. We maybe don't even have like the residence permits. So it's very hard to get an official apartment. So when a student do end up getting an apartment, when they then move out, they just like pass the contract over to like another student. So it's like this little like ecosystem and Facebook groups among international students in Taiwan that takes care of everyone, and you know, share all the knowledge they've gotten here.
So what were some of the first challenges that you faced when you got to Taiwan? Like, I understand that finding a place to rent can be difficult, and you know, you can't get a credit card, you're using cash. But what about things that were like more cultural? Was there like any culture shock for you when you got there? Like maybe even in your first 6 months that you did in your exchange?
So the thing is, like, I was very, like, especially during my first couple of years when I was like exchange student, because I'm not an adventurous person. So I was just like staying inside like my little school bubble as much as possible. But there were definitely like differences between like how I grew up and here in Taiwan. The thing is, like, the first week when I came, literally like my first day going into like the campus where we were gonna stay, there was like a snake on the floor that the students who were supposed to greet me at the campus were not there, because they were busy chasing the snake. So that was like the first time I was like, okay, someone is supposed to be here to greet me. Where are they? Like, now I'm like all alone. And then, oh yeah, they will be here soon. They're just like catching a snake. And I'm like, what is this? So that was like the first real shock that I had. And then after that, like, I wouldn't say there hasn't been that many shocks in terms of like the culture shock, but there are like a lot of things, like it's quite religious, and you have like the prayer, especially like we just had like the Lunar New Year, and the religious and praying is like a big part of everyone's life, especially like over the course of like 1 year, where to me it was like I never heard of doing this in Sweden. Like we're officially like Christians, but we don't go to church. We're not religious at all. So that has always been like the biggest like, wow, I cannot believe that this isn't a thing in some countries. But then, of course, there's like small things like with the food, what kind of food they're eating. They have like the famous stinky tofu here in Taiwan, which is like the thing that everyone wants foreigners to try. So I've definitely had like my fair share of that. And then we have like the bubble milk tea, of course, which is like Taiwan famous, the boba. Which to me is like almost weirder than stinky tofu. I'm not a big like boba guy or like drinking things with chewy bubbles in it.
Really? I thought that if you didn't like that, they would kick you out of the country.
Yeah, they have like milk tea just without the bubbles.
Okay.
So we have found a
so
compromise.
if you drink that, you're okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's a good compromise. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Then they let you stay. That's good. And
Yeah.
I would imagine that the language is probably also a big part of that. You were taking language classes right in your second trip. How well do people speak English in Taiwan? Like local people, like do you need to speak Mandarin to get by there?
So you definitely don't need to speak Mandarin to get by. And I would say like as long as you keep yourself to like the infrastructure, like Taipei, and then we have like a high speed rail down to like Kaohsiung, which is like the main city down in the south. As long as you stay along these like larger cities, then you definitely go by with English. Like no question about it. It's then if you want to leave that and go on like excursions on your own on a scooter and you drive like 1-2 hours up into the mountains and you meet like some Aboriginal little tribe maybe or something like that, then you're gonna have a lot of issues if you're gonna try to like only speak English. But everyone in Taiwan is like super friendly and super helpful, and they will definitely still continue to help you. But if you don't speak Mandarin, it's just going to take a lot longer time for them to explain how to help you. But everyone tries. They're like, you have these like 85-year-old like grandmas. They see that you're lost. You're looking for like, when I came here the first time, it was like physically maps, like we didn't have like smartphones at the time. So then a lot of times you were just like standing there on the street and just holding a map. They know that you're looking for something. So they will come up and they will try asking you in Mandarin, like, where do you want to go? And I'm like, 我不知道, like I have no idea where I want to go, like just take me out of here. I want to go home. So there's no problems at all, but Mandarin definitely helps if you want to explore like the non-touristy places, but also like just life outside of the cities here in Taiwan.
And I would imagine that after 14 years, you probably speak Mandarin pretty well.
Pretty well. Yeah, I stopped studying like 6 years ago, so it has definitely like declined since then. But yeah, I can get by for sure. But there's still like a lot of things, especially things that you're not interested in yourself. Then you have to like actively learn phrases for topics that you don't even care about in English. Those I just like give up. It just takes too much time and it's just not fun. But like the food you're eating and like daily basis, like how to like commute to work, like catching a bus, reading like signs, like the bus stops and stuff, like no problem.
Yeah, like the difference between like an upper intermediate speaker and an advanced speaker is really just vocabulary, right? It's the technical stuff that you don't talk about every day. And like you said, you kind of have to go out of your way to learn it because it may or may not come up in day-to-day conversation with somebody, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you have to either be interested in like those specific topics or just interested in like learning languages in general, which I could not be further away from this, But like I studied business, so at the time I had a very good like understanding of like business Chinese, which like impressed a lot of people. But now, because I don't really work in that world anymore, so I lost a lot of my knowledge. And also, like when I was a student, we had to learn how to draw the characters by hand. So I could like draw for hand, which impressed anyone. Like just writing my name with a pen, people would be like, "Wow, you can write your name?" And I'm like, "Dude, I'm an adult." But now it's like basically like the name is the only thing I can write because you don't really write with your hands anymore. You just like text on your phone. So I can text and stuff with pinyin, and I have like Taiwanese friends that I've never spoken English with and stuff like that. But as soon as you stop like learning how to like write for hand, like within like 3 to 6 months, you just forget everything, which is like very, very sad, to be honest.
Would you say that the writing system is the hardest part of learning Mandarin, or was there something else that was more difficult?
The tones of Mandarin, like it's so I just don't understand it, because like, so they have like the 4 tones, and it goes like, you know, up and down, and like it's a up and down, and then it's just like flat. This is so difficult to get right. And if you screw up just the tone, even like if you go to like you go to a drink store if you want to have some like bubble milk tea, and then the word for sugar is like tang, second tone, like it goes up like tang, but the word for soup is tang, and it's a flat tone. And I can go up to a drink store where they're gonna ask me like, how much ice do you want in your drink, and how much sugar do you want in a drink? And I always like, I accidentally say like tang, which means soup, and they'll be like, huh? Like what do you mean? Like what could you possibly mean at this point, you know? And just because the tone is wrong, they have no clue that I'm trying to say sugar and I accidentally say soup, which to me and to all other foreigners sound exactly the same. So yeah, it's stuff like that. And even now, like after 14 years, you know, I try to like learn maybe like a new phrase or like memorize, and even words that it's not that I've known for 14 years, but I don't use on a daily basis. I get the tone wrong, and people will be like, huh? Like, what do you mean? I don't understand. And I'm like, okay, just give me that thing over there. And you have to like describe exactly what you want instead.
Like, we don't have a mental representation for that. I mean, as speakers of languages that aren't tonal, we know what, you know, pronunciation sounds like. Oh, this word is pronounced like this, but I feel like the tone is a different level. Like it's even more separate than just a regular pronunciation.
Yeah. I haven't really been able to explain it very well, but like exactly as you said, like it's not the same as just like mispronouncing a word. It's like to say a completely wrong word that people just don't understand, you know?
Like it's a different word. It's a different character.
It's a completely different word. It would be like, hi. It will be like me saying like, hi, my name is Lucas and I'm from Table. And I'm like, Table? Table. I don't understand. I don't know where table is. Like I've never heard this word before. And they'll be like one tone different. I'll be like, oh, Sweden. Like, oh, Sweden.
I've heard people say that Swedish is like a semi-tonal language. What are your thoughts on that?
We definitely have like our different tones, and people, if I would speak with a Swedish accent, then in the end of the sentence I would always like go up, and it always sounds like I'm asking a question when I'm speaking Swedish with a Swedish accent. The problem is in Swedish, it's like even if you screw up the tones, the meaning does not change. It's just about like how we talk, and like it's more about the mood you're in, and
it's
if
like the rhythm of the language maybe.
Yeah, but the meaning would never change based on the semitones or something like that. So not comparable.
And does the like with Swedish, that's what I've heard. Like I don't speak Swedish obviously, but I've heard people say that there's a real like kind of a lilt where like the word, like you said, the word maybe goes up at the end. Is that applied equally to all words, or do some words have that and other ones don't?
I don't know. I never learned this in Swedish. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. No, I have no clue about that, to be honest. Because I don't notice that the words go up in Swedish either. I just speak Swedish, and then other people are pointing this out to me. So I think if you listen to Swedish people speak, you will know more than me for sure. Yeah.
Like I heard somebody give an example that was like it was like svenska. Like that means Swedish, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
And so it goes down and then it goes svenska.
So if I would speak like normally like Swedish, I would say svenska.
Svenska.
Okay. Yeah.
So there is a definite separation there. There is kind of a tone.
Yeah. Maybe that. Just to give you an example, like, hej, jag heter Lukas, jag kommer från Sverige och jag har bott här i Taiwan i 14 år. Och nu pratar vi här om mitt liv här i Taiwan, och det är väldigt trevligt att prata med dig. That's how Swedish would sound like.
Huh. I mean, it is very melodic. Very melodic. And I've heard people say that it's semi-tonal, but yeah, maybe that's a stretch. Especially in comparison to like Mandarin Chinese, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's definitely not comparable. But yeah, we because I grew up especially like close to the Norwegian border, and Swedish and Norwegians can communicate with each other. We think that Norwegians are even more extreme, and they sound like super happy even for us Swedes. So I can imagine how Swedish would sound to like English speakers, because that's how Norwegian people sound to us, basically. So yeah, it's just like
Okay.
super happy and like always like just like jumping around in their little languages.
And now in your day-to-day life, do you speak more Mandarin or more English?
I would say it's mostly English. So like I have a Taiwanese wife. We speak mostly English at home. Like, I would say like 90%. And then like when we speak with her family, it will be all in Mandarin. And if there are like some words that she may not know in English, she would describe it and tell me in Mandarin, and then we will like continue the conversation there. So yeah, mostly English. But that's also because of me and my preferences. I have like foreign friends who is just like only speaking like Mandarin with their spouse or like with their friends. But because I don't really have an interest in the language to begin with, so I have like just chosen to stay as much English as possible.
Like Swedish people have a reputation for speaking English like extremely well. So by the time you got to Taiwan the first time, were you already like fluent in English?
Yes, when it came to Taiwan, but the semester before that, I went to the US to study. So that the first time, it's a big difference between understanding English and speaking it like fluently. But after like one semester in the US, I felt like I could speak. Like I don't have a Swedish accent. I don't think I ever had it, but it was very clear. Like after that first semester in the US, I came back home and I accidentally spoke English to like my friends, and they have like super strong Swedish accents, which I didn't have. But yeah, we already understood everything, and there was never really an issue. It was never a concern that like I would travel by myself to the States or to Asia, and not knowing English well enough. So yeah, I think the school very like prepared us a lot. But in Sweden, there's also like there's no reason for us to speak English, so we never really get to practice it outside of school. So most of the time, like you watch the movies, you read the books, and you have a very good like vocabulary understanding, but you don't really practice it as much, other than just like the example phrases in the book, for example.
Mm-hmm. You have more of a passive knowledge than an active knowledge of English.
Yeah, like for example, like my parents, like they would understand English as well. Like when me and my wife talk in front of them in English, they would understand, but they would never really know like how to reply, because they know how to reply like in Swedish and then direct translate it to English, which may or may not work sometimes. So they would just prefer to like tell me to reply to her in English, although I know they understand everything and they would know like the key phrases, but they just worry that it's not going to be like grammatically correct. So they are like, okay, please help us translate this.
Mm-hmm. They're like a little bit self-conscious about how it sounds or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think most Swedes are that, because we haven't had the opportunity to actually practice. So we will understand everything, and we will know how to make ourselves understood in English. But as soon as we get like one word wrong, we will be very like self-conscious, and we'll be like, oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said that word wrong or something.
That one word, oh man.
Yeah.
I thought I was fluent, and then that one word got in the way.
Yeah. No, it's very difficult. Like I think the most difficult thing is like in English, you have like I am, you are, and like I has is something like Swedish people would say, like, I has 5 crowns or something, because we don't have, it's the same word for us, so we don't have to like switch the words depending on like the singular or plural or first person, third person, whatever. And so it's very basic mistakes, and I think that's why we're not really like that confident and comfortable, like just speaking it out of for no reason.
Have you met any Swedes in Taiwan? Is there a population?
There's no population, but I've throughout the years I've met like a few. I think there's like I'm working quite closely to with the Swedish office, so I get to meet more than most. But yeah, I think it's only like 2 or 3 Swedes throughout my years here that I've like randomly met on the streets or something like that. Yeah.
You mentioned that when you were first in Taiwan, you met kind of an international group of other students who were learning Mandarin. Does that mean that Taiwan is like a pretty international country? Like, is it pretty diverse in terms of having lots of foreigners there?
So I would say now It's a huge difference compared to when I first arrived here, like 14 years ago. Because when I first got here, I always lived like in the middle of Taipei. Like I literally live on the same street now as when I first came here like 14 years ago. And when I first arrived, I saw like one other than like school area and the campus, I saw like one other like white person per week. That was like the average when I arrived. Now it's like you meet every day. You meet one every like 10, 15 minutes if you're out walking around, you know. And I think a big factor to that is like COVID actually, and how Taiwan was managing the whole COVID situation. Because if you compare like before and after COVID, there's so many more like both exchange students and like students in general, like core or like program students, but also a lot more foreigners now, because they also the Taiwan government work more together with like European and American companies. So it's a lot more foreigners on like all level of life. And when I arrived, it was literally only like students or English teachers. And people would ask me like that's how you know that you become an adult in Taiwan. Because like my first 5 years, they would be like, oh, you're a student. And I still remember like the first time someone asking me like, oh, hi, you're a foreigner. You must be an English teacher. Because that means like, okay, now you look old. You look too old to be a student. So an English teacher is like the only option. But now it's like we have people like, I think the biggest thing is they're doing a very good like environmental push, and they're creating these like wind turbines all around the island. And those are mainly done with like Europeans. So there's like a lot of foreigners that are here just to do that. So I think that has also like made a huge push. And people are also aware of just because you're a foreigner in Taiwan does not mean that you're an English teacher now. Before COVID, there was like not a chance.
So like you interview a lot of different people on your channel from all over the world, right? That live in Taiwan. Would you say that most of them are there for economic reasons? Like they moved specifically for a job like you're talking about?
No, like no, I haven't met a single one who has actually moved to Taiwan for a job that was like already like planned. It's either people are moving to Taiwan because they are studying either Chinese or same as me, like they just wanted to go somewhere and Taiwan ended up being an option. Or especially like during COVID, a lot of people just wanted to travel, and Taiwan was like the only country that was open and that did not have COVID. So a lot of people just came because their choice, their plan A was closed. And then mainly like it's like China, Japan, Korea. That's like the main Asian places for people who want to either study or have like a career. But there was like a good like 2 years where Taiwan just like picked up every single one, like all the students and also all the talent. And then I've met a lot of people who are just like, oh yeah, the plan was to move to Taiwan, stay here until like, for example, the Korean border opened up. But then they've realized like just how great Taiwan is. So they have stayed here now for like, 5 years.
And I guess taking it back to your story, it was also kind of random how you ended up there, right? Like you did this exchange and met this girl and all that kind of stuff. But like 14 years later, what is it about Taiwan that really keeps you there? Why do you stay? What is in Taiwan that you can't get in another place?
What is in another place that I cannot get in Taiwan? That's the question. Like first of all, you can get everything that you want. Like I think Taiwan is the perfect mix between like West and East, because if you want to go like to like the American brand name stores and you want to have like the luxury shopping experience, you go to like Taipei 101 Xinyi, and literally I can walk to Taipei 101 in 10 minutes from where I am right now. But if I walk in the other direction, I have like a 2-hour like hiking path up in the middle of the mountains. And I have like the most like local Taiwanese shop with like a temple in the middle of like a garden. And it's so accessible, like in Taipei specifically. But then literally like yesterday for like a YouTube video, we took a car ride, like 2 hours from Taipei. And we ended up in a place called like Lalashan, which is like just peach farms everywhere. And it's 2,000 meters high mountain. So it's like 2 kilometers up that you can drive to with a car. and like the roads are just like it's asphalt all the way, and it's just like super convenient. There's like a parking up on like 2,000 meters up, 2 hours from like Taipei 101, and in between, like you have like countless of waterfalls. You have a beach like with a car, maybe like it's 40-50 minutes away from like Taipei and like Taipei 101. And I made a YouTube video, like really pushing it, to be honest. But I made a YouTube video when I was on my scooter, and I saw like I passed by Taipei 101. I went by and swam in a waterfall. I went to the beach, and I drove up to a mountain, which is like the highest mountain of Taipei. I don't know how high it is, but the highest mountain of Taipei. And I saw a volcano, all in like one day. And then I went back to another beach to see the sunset. That's the thing that you can do in Taiwan,
And it's such a small country, all of that in one small little place.
Exactly. And the other thing that because this kind of like, I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say, but like you kind of get tired of this, and it's not something that you would do every day, right? Like if you've seen one waterfall, it will take a while before you go back to see the same waterfall. But the fact that makes me stay here on like a day-to-day basis is just like the convenience. And we have the world famous like 7-Eleven stores, which is like, it's in a completely different level here in Taiwan compared to like the US or in Europe. Like you do everything in the convenience stores. And I think Taiwan has like, now they might be like the third or second highest ratio per like person and convenience store. And there's literally like a convenience store in any like block in entire Taiwan. Like yesterday, we were up like 2,000 meters high mountain, and of course they have a 7-Eleven there, and you get almost like all the food there if you want, but you pay your bills. You can go in and you can do like dry cleaning. If you want to ship something across Taiwan, you go into one 7-Eleven, you tell them, hey, I want this shipped to my friend down in South. Okay, yeah, tomorrow it will be at that 7-Eleven. So everything is done at 7-Elevens, and you don't need anything else to survive for at least 14 years.
And then talking about like your lifestyle now in Taiwan, you said that when you were first there, going to school or something like that, it was kind of hard to integrate into the society. Like there was some limitations on what you could do. And where are you at now? Is it different for you now after being there for so long?
It's definitely a difference for sure, but I would still argue that it's very, very hard to be integrated unless you have like a local like partner or like very good like local friends that maybe if you have like an office job or like you start to meet up with like local Taiwanese people, you definitely have the path and you have the option, but it's still like very split. Like if you're a foreigner in a company and you're working like in an international company with a lot of other foreigners, they most likely would have like a foreign team and maybe like one or two Taiwanese people in that team. But for example, like a lot of my friends who are not English teachers, they were working like sales or like marketing. And it would be like an international team within a local company. So you wouldn't really be like that integrated that way. And when we have like these company parties, like the end of the year party, which is like a big thing here in Taiwan, we call like the Weiya. They would have like a huge room, let's say with like, 1,000 people. The entire company might be there for like 1,000 people. And they would have like 100 tables and 10 people among each table. The foreigners would always be like on one table together. And then like the rest of the Taiwanese people will be there. And you will always be like a foreigner if you're in Taiwan, just because of this, and people will see you right away and they will assume that you don't speak Mandarin, especially like in Taipei. If you go out in the middle of nowhere, they will actually assume that you speak Mandarin because first of all, they don't speak English, so they just hope that you speak Mandarin. But then it's also like if you've been in Taiwan long enough to find these like super random places, you know at least how to get around with Mandarin. And then they would also assume that it's like your first week in Taiwan and that you don't know anything, which after 14 years can be pretty annoying because you have like that sentence is like my name is Lukas. I've been here for like 14 years. Wow, your Chinese is really, really good. Oh, thank you so much. It's like the exact same like sentences and phrases every single time you meet someone. But I mean, it's all from like a goodness of the heart. They don't treat you as a foreigner like, oh, you're not one of us. Like, we're going to treat you differently. They treat you differently because they want to welcome you to Taiwan. So, you get like free stuff, you get like the biggest welcomes, and they're like, oh yeah, you're a foreigner. I don't think you know how to do this, but not from like, oh, you must be a dumb foreigner. It's just like, this must be like your first couple of days here. Let me grab your hand and walk you across the street so you can find the 7-Eleven sign, It's like, it's kind of almost on like that level. Which when you've lived here for like 14 years, you're like, yeah, I want to feel like home. I don't really want to feel like this anymore because this is my home now. But overall, it's amazing being a foreigner in Taiwan, but it's not that easy to integrate unless you yourself like really like focus on getting into the society and whatever you might be interested in, if it's like the culture, the religion, or whatever. I have friends who have lived like outside of Taipei for like 14 years, and they have never seen like a white person for years, So you could definitely do that, but you have to like actively like leave Taipei and build your own life somewhere else.
Like Taipei in itself is a pretty international place, but Taiwan as a country might not be.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess people wanting to help you and like, hey, let me show you where the 7-Eleven is and everything is great if you really do need that help. And if you don't need that help, if you've been there for 14 years, it could feel a little bit patronizing, even if it's not intended to be that way, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's also like a double-edged sword, because I also don't think that maybe I wouldn't have been here this whole time unless they would have been like super friendly, like showing me around, helping me explain everything like this, because in the beginning, when you don't speak a word of Mandarin, like you need this in order to like to do the things as a local and to like to find everything, like because you go to like a local market and they just have like fruits. It could be like 50 like balls of fruit, and you have no idea of how much it costs. You don't even know if they buy it, if you pay per item or per kilo or whatever. So you need this kind of like interaction to really understand. But what they also don't understand is like, if I say, oh, I've been here for 14 years, they would not think that, oh, then you must know everything. They will think that, wow, you must really like Taiwan, but I'm still going to help you to locate the nearest 7-Eleven. And it's like, yeah, it's
for better or for worse. I guess you get
a
a lot of attention, probably, especially if you're speaking Chinese.
Yes, yeah. That was also like way different when I first arrived. So I was like a superstar, because I was like quite young, and then I studied Chinese right away. So I just, everywhere I walked, as soon as I just said like ni hao, which is like, you learn on the plane over here, people be like, wow, oh my God, your Chinese is amazing. And, people want to take photos just because you're a foreigner in their like tiny village, It's, it might sound narcissistic, but like, I loved it.
Well, I mean, it's good motivation to keep learning, right? You're getting all of this positive reinforcement from people on a daily basis. I can relate to that as well. Like, on my other channel, I make mostly Filipino content, right? And so I've been speaking Tagalog or Filipino for like almost 10 years now. And all the way through my learning, people have just kind of encouraged me, oh, wow, you're so good. Like, I'll go up to someone and just be like, hey, how are you? In Tagalog. And they'd be like, wow, you're so good. How did you learn that? And yeah, the same thing. 10 years later, I've had that interaction a million times, right? But yeah, it's always kind of the same. People are always like, whoa, I can't believe that you speak the language. And so you have, your talking points of like, yeah, okay, this is why, and this is how it happened, and this is how long I've been doing it. It's nice. It's because for those people, it's a very unique experience because they might have not met a foreigner that speaks the language. But, for you and I, we have had these conversations a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
It's not the new experience, but I remember, I guess I'm a little bit different than you in this regard. I do like languages, and so I kind of go out of my way to try to learn them and practice them. I enjoy doing that. It's kind of like a hobby for me. And so even here in Canada, I'll speak Tagalog with Filipinos, and I really enjoy that. And that's also been a big part of my content, the kind of reactions of people. But sometimes I do sometimes I just won't speak it if I don't want to draw any attention, because it always kind of becomes a thing. You know, there's been very few circumstances where I've been able to, let's say, go into a store and speak with a Filipino person that I don't know and just ask them like, hey, can you tell me where this thing is? And they'll just say, yeah, of course. And then usually there's always like, they don't even hear the question. It's just like, what do you mean? And so, yeah, you kind of, it's like, I mean, I chose this. I can just speak English if I want as well. I don't need to speak Tagalog, but I know what you mean. It can be a little bit much sometimes, where it's like, I don't need to draw too much attention today. I'm okay. I'll just speak English.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm the same too, especially when it comes to like the banks or like any kind of like official government paperwork. I never speak Mandarin with them. I just speak like English, because then like their first instinct is to like help you fill out all the paperwork. So I have definitely like played that card too. I'm just like, okay, like, do you understand? And I'm like, it's a little bit confusing. And they'll be like, oh, don't worry. Like, let me take this like 3-page like application, and like, I just like fill it out. And then like, I give them like my residence card, and they just like write all the information from my card. And they're like, okay, please sign here. Like, boom, done. So much faster. And you're just like, okay, this was better for everyone, believe me.
It's a smoother process. And so like, where do you feel like you are in that process of integration? You said that it's a hard thing to do as a foreigner in Taiwan. You're kind of always maybe seen as someone that's different because of the way that you look. How do you feel now? Like, I mean, at this point, you've almost been in Taiwan as long as you were in Sweden, right? Like, it's getting pretty close to 50-50.
Yeah, pretty close. Yeah. The thing is like now I'm married, and once you go like in my case, like the spouse route, and you start to like, I think pretty much night and day difference. Like from the day like I proposed to my now wife, like my family or like her family, like my family, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, they would like treat me very differently from like one day to another. And then they're like, okay, now you're part of the family. So then like they just like drag you in, and then you're in the family. You do everything like locally. You're not like the foreign boyfriend that their daughter dragged home one day, you know. And like we just had like the Lunar New Year now, and for like one day my wife was busy doing something, and then I went to like temples to pray with her parents without her being there. And then my Mandarin is not great when it comes to like the religious proceedings and like what you should do and like everything like this with praying and stuff. And they speak Taiwanese, which is a different language. So they're also not used to these like religious traditional phrases in Mandarin. So it was kind of like we were both speaking like our second languages, trying to like just make sure I don't make a fool out of myself in the temple. And that's like, I really felt like, you know, now I'm part of this, and I have like more direct connections to other Taiwanese people, not only like my one wife or previously like my one colleague. So like all my Taiwanese friends were like my one Taiwanese colleague's friends, and I just like kind of like piggybacked on his friendship. So yeah, for me it took very, very long time, just because I also didn't really have that interest to begin with. But if anyone wants to come to Taiwan and they want to have these direct connections, like you can get that right away. Just like go out, sign up for like language exchange classes that they have like tons of everywhere. And you're like, hey, I want you to be my friend. I just never did that. So it's first now what I'm actually integrated, and I feel like I'm not dependent on my wife to get these new experiences and direct contact with Taiwanese culture.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like you've taken on a Taiwanese identity to a certain degree after all these years?
This is very difficult. No, I would always be like a foreigner. They have this like with Taiwan specifically because of Taiwan's identity on a global stage. It's very hard as well, and like they wouldn't allow me to become Taiwanese unless I give up my Swedish passport.
Okay.
So just because of that they don't accept dual citizenships unless you are Taiwanese first. I always know like I'm never gonna be, and even if I would get like a passport that says I'm Taiwanese, people would still see this before they see my passport. So they would just like not treat me as a Taiwanese. So I never had the aspiration or the hope to become Taiwanese, but I definitely feel like I belong here. And now as well, with like the more foreigners that come to Taiwan, the more we're becoming like an actual like just part of the Taiwanese society and not like a part outside of the Taiwanese society.
But like the way that people see you, like maybe legally you can't get the passport without giving up your European passport, and maybe socially they treat you like you're different than everybody else. But does that impact the way that you see yourself? Like all of that stuff aside, do you feel like you have a Taiwanese identity within yourself?
No.
No.
I think maybe it would have been different if I would have moved to Taiwan to live here in Taiwan. Because like my first like 8 or 10 years here was just like 1 year at a time without having like any Taiwanese like, you know, social security number or something like that. So I've always been like outside of the society, and it's just very hard to everything you do just reminds you that you're a foreigner. And even now, like, you know, we were just able to like with a foreigner with a foreign I have a residence card for like I had it for 5 years, and now I have a permanent residence card in Taiwan. I can literally like stay in Taiwan for the rest of my life legally without working or doing anything. But even like those numbers, you go to the bank, you go to like you want to book a train ticket online, then you cannot, because like it shows up as a non-Taiwanese social security number. So it will just be like an error message on the websites or in the systems. And it's stuff like this that you'll be like, it doesn't matter how hard I try. Like I need the Taiwan government and system to change before I can change myself.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to see yourself as a local if the system is telling you that you're not and you never will be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but I don't. When I first arrived here too, like I haven't seen that as a negative thing, because I always said as well, is like if I would feel like home in Taiwan, why would I go back home to Sweden? Like the reason for why I am in Taiwan is because it is not my home, and I'm like on a 8-year-long summer vacation. You know, that's how it felt, and I love that. And that's also like the reason for why I'm here, because I never really felt like I'm home, because then I feel like I would be like quite boring and I would want to go somewhere else.
Yeah, there's a balance between like wanting to fit in and feel at home, but also wanting it to be different than where you came from. Because like you said, if it's the same as Sweden, then just stay in Sweden, right?
Exactly, yeah. And also like just because of like my YouTube channel and my content, like my content is like explaining Taiwan from a foreigner's perspective. So I'm always like motivated to stay the foreigner and to always like look at it from my Swedish or foreign point of view. So I'm kind of like always like reminding myself as well that I am a foreigner here in Taiwan, because it hasn't really been my goal to like integrate and to become Taiwanese. That has like never really been any reason for why I'm here. So I'm very happy with where I am. I'm very happy with where Taiwan is, but we're still a little bit like oil and water sometimes. We don't really mix like all the time.
Yeah, and that's okay. You know, it's there's beauty in that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Lukas, this has been really, really fun. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it, man.
Of course, my pleasure. It's very nice to be on the other side of these interviews sometimes.
Yeah, and tell people how they can find your content online.
So if you speak Mandarin, just type in 外国人介绍台湾 on YouTube, or you type in Lukas in Taiwan, and then you will see interviews with other foreigners living in Taiwan, or also some adventures of me trying new different locations or different things here in Taiwan, and hopefully also teach you a thing or two.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much, man. I appreciate this.